like there are these moments where I was like, well, if I want to have friends, if I want to like be part of a group, I can't come off as like headstrong. I can't come off as like spicy, as they say, or I can't come off as hot-headed, because I want to be liked. I want to have friends. I want to have like my group of people. So yes, I decided to like change up my vernacular, code switch, if you will, and kind of I started watching these movies. I got into The Office. I watched Parks and Rec. I watched all these like white people shows, for lack of a better word, and so I could talk about it and make jokes, and people thought it was funny, and they were like, oh, we love Hector. He's so great. He's so fun. And in reality, I wasn't even really being me. Like, I was being the me that I knew they would like.
Mi gente, dímelo, what up? Happy New Year. Welcome to another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast, brought to you by Plural. You already know the vibes. It's your boy, Pavel Martinez, bringing you another special episode with another very special guest. Now, the clip you just heard in the intro is with this week's guest, Hector Martinez. Before getting into the full conversation, let me give you a quick little bio on Hector so that you know a bit more about him. Now, Hector is a native New Yorker. He's actually from Queens, New York, to be exact. He's from Mexican parents, and he actually grew up his whole life speaking Spanish and learning all about his Mexican heritage. He left Queens briefly to go to Utah, where he studied communications at BYU. After graduating in 2019, he started his career in advertising, specifically on the brand management side, and he's currently actually working at Wieden Kennedy as a brand executive. Now that you know a little bit more about Hector, let's jump right into the episode. It's interesting, man. We just started, talking before we started recording, and you said you just graduated, man. How does it feel? Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I just graduated 2 years ago, in 2019. So it's been exciting. I'm the first of my family to actually graduate with a college degree. So it's been interesting.
That's an accomplishment, man. And being that, like, you're probably your first in your family to be at your position and like your type of industry. Your family probably has no idea what you're doing for work. They're like, I don't get it.
Oh yeah. Every day it's always like a constant struggle of, oh, are you busy, or what are you doing? Like, do you even have a job? Like, I do have a job. I do things. It might not be things that you're familiar with, but yeah, definitely. First in my family to kind of have like a career, I think really what the word would be, instead of just a job. So that's been it's been very interesting. Like my mom's a housemaid. Well, she was a housemaid for years. And now she's still a housekeeper, but she works in a retirement home. So yeah, very different. Like, me telling her I'm tired from a day is very different from her telling me that she's tired from a day. So
Yeah, I get that, man. My grandma, my abuelita, who I adore, she used to clean houses as well. And it's interesting, like, my mom always tries to give me advice. And the other day I was like, I had to be honest with her, but I didn't know how to tell her. I was like, Mom, your advice, I didn't tell her like this, but in reality, like, your advice is like so outdated. Like, it's not really relevant to like what I'm doing. And it's interesting. Yeah. Like, she swears all I do at work is just like watch TikTok videos.
yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
But it's interesting too, man. Like, the way that we initially connected is when I published the episode with Nancy Reyes. Like, you listen to it, and tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So I went to a school that was like a PWI. So it's a predominantly white institution. I went to school in Utah. So I didn't really see a lot of people that looked like me, let alone did I see a lot of people that looked like me in my program or in the industry that I was about to go into. So I was always very curious on like, oh, who's out there? Like, kind of like, what agencies are out there? Who is running these agencies? And I kind of ran across Nancy's LinkedIn profile, I think like a year ago or a year and a half ago, when I was interning in New York. And I instantly was like, oh my gosh, like, she's Latina. Like, I need to know who she is. I need to know like what's going on. And so I like followed her on LinkedIn, like kind of always see her updates. And when I saw this podcast come up, I've been a very huge proponent of like who and what my Latinidad means to me in like these last few years. And I instantly clicked on it. I listened, and I just felt nothing but like seen. I was like, she gets it. She's speaking her truth. She's speaking my truth, and I want nothing more but for people to understand, like, this is a reality. We don't really talk about it. We don't really kind of go about talking about what Latinx people go through. I think on a regular basis, and I think we're just starting to see it in culture more in music than anything else. I still have yet to see a lot of things in my own industry, as well as like TV or movies, really. But music starting to seep in, with Spanish music coming in on the radio, Spanish collaborations coming in, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, people know that we're out there. People know that, like, we speak Spanish, but what else do they know? Am I forever going to be like this spicy person who like is hot tempered and like being romanticized, or all these things? Or am I a human that is kind of going through a struggle of, I have two cultures here, like, whether I want it or not, I have two of them. I have one that I live at home and one that I live when I leave my home. So hearing Nancy talk about that in the workplace was just so good for me to hear, knowing that, okay, it's real. It's not in my head. I also go through this. She goes through this. And it's just a real conversation. So
Wow, man, you've said so many things there that resonated with me, and I'd love to jump into all of those, man. But I think it's really important because, like, especially that piece that you mentioned around, like, yo, it's not just in my head, right? Because the thing that I was struggling with when, and I'm still struggling through certain things, right? Like, we just think, like, it's this voice in our head that tells us things, and often we think it's alone. So then when we see other people, we're like, oh shit, like, I'm not going crazy, right? And often, like, we're surrounded by people that don't look like us. So there isn't that opportunity to say, yo, am I going crazy, or did X, Y, and Z just happen? You know what I mean? Were there any specific instances in the interview where you felt seen, as you mentioned?
yeah, I think one of the biggest things was kind of talking about growing up and going to school and learning English. I think that whole transition for me, I have never talked about out loud. I've never talked about it out loud. I've never told anyone those sentiments of growing up like that. And I think that's really, really what sets us up for the rest of our lives, whether we believe it or not. Like, yeah, we can talk about college, we can talk about our careers, but we're adults, right? Like, we're like kind of functioning. We have more of an intelligence of like what's going on. Like, we've gone through school, but no one talks about those early ages of what that means in our development. And I think that for me was what really, really made me be seen, was understanding, like, okay, cool, like, she's coming home, right? And she's trying to like figure out school and learning English and not even realizing when that happened. And when I heard that, I kind of looked back and I was like, when did I learn English? Like, how did I learn? Because I know my parents didn't teach me. I know that much. Like, my parents both immigrated from Mexico, met in LA, moved to New York, and that's where I was born and raised. So I don't even remember when I learned English. All I know is that one day I was in school and I was just reading, writing, and speaking like I had been growing up speaking it, when that wasn't true. Like, I spoke Spanish my whole life. At home, my mom still struggles with with speaking English. So yeah, I think that whole transition is just so important for people to understand. Like, this is a development. Like, we are growing up like that, and sometimes people don't pause for us, and like, we're deemed as uneducated if we're like struggling. And it's like, I'm not uneducated. I just don't know this. Like, I'm not dumb. So I think that's what hit hard for me, when I was like, yeah, I get that. I remember being 5 years old in kindergarten and just kind of like, what? And then being in a program like called ESL, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is, but I guess I'm doing ESL now. And like, my mom couldn't say anything because she didn't know what was going on either. So yeah, I think that whole transition for me was really is really important for me to understand, like, that happened. And growing up speaking two languages, you kind of lose a lot of support, whether your parents intentionally are doing it or not, which causes us to kind of grow up a little bit faster in all sense of reality. Like, my mom wasn't helping me with my science fair project in 4th grade. Like, my dad wasn't helping me with like my English homework or my book reports, because that wasn't a thing for him. So I think all those early on, like early age development stages, just I've never talked about. I've never told anyone like, oh yeah, like I remember copying someone's book report in like the second grade because I had no idea what the structure was. And when I asked my parents, they didn't know either. So like just stuff like that where I had to learn a lot of things on my own, and I like it kind of set me up to be more of a proactive person now. So I don't get bored. I'm in high school, I'm in college, I'm at work, and I'm like, okay, cool, how do I figure this out? And you become more like that because that's how you've had to do it your whole life. Like, how does this work? Who's gonna tell me? Oh, nobody? All right, I'll figure it out. Like I'll be scrappy and I'll make it work. So
Not only do you have to do your own work, but you also have to figure out how to pay the family bills, how to do accounting.
that's a whole process, like being able to translate everything in you're kind of like a parent to your parents when it comes to the country. Like you're teaching them about how it works because you can maneuver it better than them at this point, and not because, again, it's not because they're dumb. It's just the language does make it a lot easier. Like even like I was trying to explain to my mom like the computer, like my mom just bought a house in April. So
Hey.
that was a big move for us. That was like, oh, we did it. Like we were like, my mom's a homeowner. We did it. No, there's a lot more complications that came with it. So a lot of it now is on the computer and like paying bills, and like instead of back in the day when you could get like a paper like from the mail that tells you, hey, cool, this is your bill, call this number to pay it. And my mom got as far as saying, like, she's gotten as far to know she can call and say, someone speaks Spanish, and they're like, oh yeah, and they transfer her. Now it's more of like, hey, cool, we're paperless. You have to sign in onto our website and pay these bills. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is stressful. Like, how am I going to teach this woman to use the
Yeah.
computer? And
Yeah.
most of it is just reading. I'm like, Mom, if you can read English, like literally what this says, just click it. It says pay bill. That's all you have to do. I already set up the account with like your bank account. All you have to do is pay bill. That's all you have to. And she's like, what? ¿Y qué significa eso? I'm like, I mean, just pay it. You just click it and it's fine. And so, yeah, it's. I think now, as I've gotten older, things have gotten more complicated. Like having to buy the house was like being in all those meetings. I didn't even know what was going on. Like I was like, they would give us contracts of like long lists of things of what it meant like to get this like mortgage loan, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like what's a 30-year fix? Like who's gonna do this? Like what does this mean? Like so yeah, I had a yeah, there's been a lot more. My Spanish has definitely expanded now in my vocabulary, so I'm like, okay, I can kind of translate more. I understand what's going on. But yeah, no, it's been very difficult. And even now I see it. My brother is in high school now, and it's like I'm his parent at this point. Like my mom just kind of like let the reins go. She's just like, oh, he has this assignment. How's he doing in school? What is his grade? Everything's just online. So now we've shifted to a completely different like hurdle. Now it's like not now it's not just the language. It's like the language and technology. So it's been kind of it's been a journey, but we love it. We love the journey.
We do. Well, you also said that, in the last few years, you've been sort of navigating and exploring like what even being, your Latinidad means to you as well, right? And some of those early years like has such a huge impact on us, right? Like there you are, young, native Spanish speaker, sort of like transforming into like American culture, et cetera. And then, like how have you been navigating that?
I don't know. I actually still don't know how I'm navigating it. So, um, it's been I will say it's been very difficult for me personally. I think the navigation of my Hispanic culture has been a lot easier in the sense that I've had my parents to always tell me about it. When I'm home, I everything's in Spanish. Like even when it comes to like the TV, the movies, like I don't think I've ever seen Shrek in English. Like I've only ever seen it in Spanish, and I believe that it's funnier in Spanish. So I don't want to ruin that for myself. Um, so I like I constantly was surrounded by Spanish media and like Spanish food. Like my mom never let us eat out. She was constantly like I made food at home. Like there's food at home, there's food at home, there's food at home. So like I feel like I missed out on a lot of American culture, just K through 12. Like I was going to school, but I was never understanding some of the references that like my peers were talking about. So I
Like
think
what?
it was like there was just like TV shows. Like I remember like The Wizard of Oz, for example. It's not a TV show, it's a movie, but I had never seen The Wizard of Oz. I was a junior in high school, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, like it's like it's the quote from Wizard of Oz," or like, "We're not in Kansas anymore." And I was like, "What the f does that even mean?" Like I don't. What are you like? What are you saying to me? I don't know what you're saying to me. And they thought it was so weird that I had never seen The Wizard of Oz, and I'm like, "Okay, well, have you ever seen Chavo del Ocho?" Like that seems weird to me that you haven't. Like I don't understand like what the problem is here. So that was a very like that definitely was something that hindered, I guess, the Americanization of culture for me. Is like even holidays like Christmas. When I found out that the rest of my like classmates weren't doing the 24th to open their presents and they were doing it the next morning, I was like, y'all wait, like y'all are waiting the next day for this? Like, no, I'm just saying like the real that like comes into Santa Claus. Like, is there even a Santa Claus if I'm staying up all night anyway, partying with my family to open it at midnight? You know, like I think like all these American traditions started to not really exist for me. So I think that really at the end of the day is what always made me feel different. I think I had to start really maneuver, like really knowing how to maneuver it when I got to college. So I went to school. So I'm from New York City. I was raised in Queens, very diverse neighborhood. My neighbors were like everything. Like on the right were Puerto Ricans. On the other right of me were from Slovakia. People in front of me were Ecuadorian. Like there was never a sense of like, oh, like we're the one Hispanic, we're like the one Latino family, like we're the Mexicans in the neighborhood. Like no, like we were just in the neighborhood. We were the Martinez family. It was fine. When I came to school out in Utah was when I realized, oh, like things are not like that's when I could say I'm not in Kansas anymore. Like I'm not in Queens anymore. Like this is some weird stuff. Like we had people smiling at each other. We had people who like grew up
Smiling at each
like,
other.
it was like people were smiling at each other. People were like stopping and having conversations, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know you. Like don't talk to me. Like I'm scared. And like people just talked about like, oh yeah, my family, like we go skiing. We have skiing season, or like we have a boat and we go down to like a place called Lake Powell and it's like beautiful. And I'm just, what are you saying to me? Like family vacations, what does that mean? I who is she? I don't know her. Like I've never been on a family vacation. So I just definitely didn't understand a lot of things that were going on. Like I didn't come to watch like The Office until college. I had no idea that was even a show, and everyone's like, oh, like I love The Office, like Jim Halpert, ha ha ha. I'm like, who the freak is that? Like I have no, like people looked at me like, what do you mean you don't know what The Office is? Like I don't. I never watched it. That was not in the house. Friends, I have yet to see it. I have never seen an episode. I know Jennifer Aniston is in it. It's all about all I know. So just like
I didn't start watching The Office until college either. I'm curious though, for you, like how did you react to some of those feelings, right? Because there you were. I feel like there's two sides to it, right? Like someone is like, oh my God, have you seen The Wizard of Oz? And you're like, no. And in that moment you can either say, all right, well, I'm gonna dedicate time to watch The Wizard of Oz so that I can be relatable. Or the other side is just like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna watch it. I'm just gonna continue doing my own thing. Like, which side did you lean on?
When I was in college, I leaned on having to assimilate a lot more. In high school, I didn't really care. I was like, oh, whatever, like that's not important to me. But in college, I would say college were the years that I suppressed a lot of my Latinidad, but at the same time learned to love it the most.
Oh, tell me about
Um,
that.
so yeah, it's very, very complicated in the sense that I am I went to a school. So just like brief demographic is 89% of the school is white. Less than 1% of the school is black. And Latinos are the highest minority on campus at 6%. there are 33,000 students on this campus. So that's not a lot. 6% is not a lot. And so I kind of began to notice like, oh, I am the only Latino in a lot of my classes, like in my dorm, in my apartments, and in just a lot of scenarios. And it was uncomfortable at first. I felt different. I felt like, what am I doing? Like, why, like, they don't understand what I'm doing, or like they're like, oh, let's go get Mexican food, and they take me to a place called Cafe Rio, and I'm like, this is Americanized. This is an Americanized burrito that you like put hot sauce on it. Like, this is not Mexican food. Like, don't do this to me. And like, that was like, there are these moments where I was like, well, if I want to have friends, if I want to like be part of a group, I can't come off as like headstrong. I can't come off as like spicy, as they say, or I can't come off as hot-headed, because I want to be liked. I want to have friends. I want to have like my group of people. So yes, I decided to like change up my vernacular, code switch, if you will, and kind of I started watching these movies. I got into The Office. I watched Parks and Rec. I watched all these like white people shows, for lack of a better word, and so I could talk about it and make jokes, and people thought it was funny, and they were like, oh, like, oh, we love Hector. He's so great. He's so fun. And in reality, I wasn't even really being me. Like, I was being the me that I knew they would like. And I think that was really, really hard, because one day, so I lived in Paraguay for 2 years, just kind of like doing humanitarian work and service. And that's when I came back from that. So I took a 2-year gap from college and came back. When I did that, that's really when I learned about my Latinidad and how to just not hide it. Because I had
Wow.
spent so long in a country just of Latinos speaking Spanish, Paraguayans, like the Paraguayos, who would be like, oh, where are you from? And I would say, oh, I'm American, like I'm from the US, because that was the truth. And they would look at me like, no, you're not. Like, where are you from? Because like your features are not white. And I'm like, oh. So the more constant that I got to realizing, yes, I'm American because I was born in the US. I'm not like American in my blood, in my heritage, and who I am as a person. I'm Mexican. Both my parents are from Mexico. My dad's from Mexico City. My mom is from Morelos. Like, that's where they're from. And that's where my features are from. And that's when I learned to love that about me. I was like, no, they're right. Like, I am Mexican. Like, I should love this. I should love this about myself. So when I came back to school, I guess, like, to give an even more understanding. So I went to a Mormon school. I went to BYU, and a lot of these kids go on missions. These 2-year missions, these 2-year service humanitarian trips, and these white kids are going to Mexico, Paraguay, Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, and they come back speaking Spanish, and they come back with an appreciation of the culture, yes, but they still come back to this privileged life of like, oh, well, I'm white again, and I'm back to my money, and I'm back to my like culture, right?
Like it was temporary for them while like you live it on a daily basis.
Exactly. And so that's when I started to call people out, and that's when I really got into who I was as a Latino on campus, and I was like, no, like, that's like, don't say that. Or like, when I remember when Despacito was like a huge thing on campus, like that song like hit, everyone was like, oh my gosh, like I love this song, and they like butchering words, like saying like groserias, and I'm like, my guy, like, don't say that around me. Like, one of my biggest pet peeves was having people who served in Mexico say vulgar words to me because they thought it was funny, and I'm like, that's not funny. Like, that's a real cuss word to me. Like if my mom were to hear me say that, she would slap my mouth. Like, she would like freaking burn my tongue if she heard me say that. So like, please don't say it.
Chancletazo to the
Yeah.
face.
Oh yeah. Like, I was like, if I'm not like dropping F-bombs like in your face, like, please don't drop those words in front of me. And like,
That
that was like a huge thing.
First of all, I love that. I mean, it was almost like permission that you were given in some ways when you went on that trip, when they said,
Yeah.
no, I mean, yes, you're American, but you're also, you know, insert wherever you're from. And that could have been anybody, right? Like, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm also imagining like me saying that and be like, no, you're Dominican. I was like, you know what? Shit. Oh shit. I'm feeling seen. Like, someone is telling me and giving me permission to
Yeah.
embrace who I am. It's so fascinating though, because when Despacito came out, and it's the same thing with like Bad Bunny, and you hear even like El Alfa on the radio, and all these like artists getting all this love. On some level, like I get so excited and happy, but on the other level, I'm like, oh word, like now you fucking with us, like
Mm-hmm.
word, like it'd be the same person that like calls you spicy, but is now like blasting
Yes.
Despacito.
No, exactly. I like just having, they're like, oh yeah, like I can get into this now. I'm like, why? Like
Sorry,
this,
I feel like that one hit a nerve. I'm sorry about that.
no, yeah, no, it did. Well, the thing is, so I grew up listening to Spanish music like my whole life. And as cliche as it is, like Selena was a huge thing for me growing up. Like I would sing her songs as a kid. I remember my mom was like, yeah, like you would run around like pretending you were Selena, like singing these songs. I was like, I'm sorry, she's such an icon. Like, geez. So
Still
like,
to this day.
yes, yeah, still. So I like grew up like listening to Spanish music. Like that's, if I were to say like something really authentic about me is my music. Like that's, like I will listen to bachata, cumbia, reggaeton. Like I listen to all these things just like alone. And sometimes I feel like I have to lower the volume because I'm like, well, I don't want to make people uncomfortable. Like, or like, is he like, does he only speak Spanish, or like just these like implications that listening to music does. So like seeing now like Bad Bunny, like I love this. Don't get me wrong, I love Bad Bunny and I love what he's doing for the community. But seeing all these like white people now going like, oh yeah, I love Bad Bunny. Like I'm trying to go to his concert. Ha ha ha. I'm like, weren't you the like 2 years ago? Weren't you telling me to like, oh, can we like skip this song because I don't know what it's saying? Like, where is this coming from? So yeah, I think that's why like it definitely hit a nerve in that sense. Is like music to me is like my where I feel the most me. Like when I get to listen to Spanish music, when I'm singing in Spanish, and like just I don't really give a crap about anything. I feel like that's who I am. So having to censor that part of me is very hard. Like I think that's where I have the most difficulty of like, oh, like have you heard like Taylor Swift's new album? Like no, like I haven't. I don't really want to, but I guess I'll listen to it now because everyone's talking about it. So yeah, music's definitely more of like like it's a soft subject for me.
Yeah, no, I get that. And before we even get to the uncomfortable situations, which I think you've like alluded to, I do want to highlight, some of those instances where you do feel just really comfortable being yourself. Like, where do you feel the most comfortable?
Yeah, I think I definitely feel the most comfortable when I'm at home with my mom and my brother. Um, I think like the few friends that I have made at BYU who serve their missions Spanish speaking and have really embraced the culture for the positive side. I think those are the friends that have seen who I really am, and because they come to my house, they share the table with us, they break bread with us, if you will, and like they meet my mom, and that is such a huge, like if you meet my mom, like la cosa va seria. That's all I'm gonna say. Like things are getting serious. Like because my mom is such a special person to me. Like she's raising like my brother and I by herself. Like she's a single mom, like who left her home to a different country, has no education, like what above a high school level, and she just bought a house. Like she's giving us the best life she possibly can. Like she's constantly teaching us about our culture. Like I love that woman, and like for me to share that with people is very dear to me. Like because she gets to express her like her humor, her comedic side. She also gets to express like her cooking. Like you get to really appreciate what she's making. It's not like, oh, like what is that? Is that going to be spicy? Like yes, it's going to be spicy. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. Like she made it, so you're going to eat it. So to avoid those situations, like I definitely it's a very like once you get invited to the house and you eat with my mom, it's like, okay, you're serious, you're a good person, and I like want you in my life.
It's official.
Yeah, it's official. So yeah, at home is probably when I feel the most like myself. Like I'm speaking Spanglish basically, because I'm speaking Spanish to my mom, Spanglish to my little brother. There's music playing in the house that's not a lick of English. Like it's all Spanish music. My mom will randomly like start like doing her little dance moves while she's cooking in the kitchen.
Oh,
My brother's like playing video games and like yelling at us because we're laughing too loud. And like I just feel so much more joy. Like I'm like, this is where I feel comfortable. Like my mom's not gonna tell me to speak English. My brother's not gonna tell me to change the song. Like this is where I'm really thriving as who I feel is me. And it's great because you're still getting that hint of American. Like I'm not saying that like I'm not American, because I am. I'm very American. But I still get that hint because my brother is still in the room. We're playing video games. We're speaking in English. Like we're listening to music that can be played now, like Bad Bunny, Maluma, like J Balvin, like all these artists like are making this scene into both countries. And it's a very Mexican American home for me, and I think that's really where I thrive. And yeah, like I think that's definitely where I feel the most authentic, just like spending time with my family, being inside this safe space of like, okay, cool. Like if I switch from English to Spanish, no one's gonna say anything. Like I don't there's not gonna be like like that word in English. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't. If I'm saying it to you in Spanish, if I'm really struggling, I don't. I promise you, I'm not pretending that I don't know English. I just don't know it. So, yeah.
Bro, I get that, man. I get that 100%. And yeah, I mean, that's probably where I'm the most comfortable as well, is around my family. And I think it's so dope that, you're at a point where you're a lot more comfortable with who you are. But, you recently graduated and you're in this new environment as well, which is, corporate. You're working, you're trying to build your career. And for me, like, that was so much more pressure than college, than middle school, because, now I'm trying to get money. Like I'm trying to, and like what I do is going to impact like my future possibilities to make money. So when I started corporate America, I took code switching to the max because I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to like be part of the crew. And also like I looked around and I was like, everybody is just as smart as I am. Everyone has the same skills. Like the way that you really advance is to build those relationships. So I thought, well, in order to build those relationships, I did what you did when you went into college. You were like, I'm going to learn everything about white popular America. And eventually I got to a point where I stopped, right? But I'm trying to understand for you, like you're so early in your career, like how are you thinking about, being your authentic self at work?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this coin for me. There's the authentic self that I bring into work, where I feel like, I'm at Wieden Kennedy right now, where I love it there, and I love that they are so open and wanting to include everyone right now, and that's awesome. So at work, my authentic self isn't really the problem of like, oh, I love Hispanic Heritage Month. Like I send like I sent one of my managers a playlist that I made of just like Spanish music, and she's just like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I'm like, yes, like let me know, and like you can send me like K-pop music. Like I'm so down to like share like music playlists here. And like that's always been great. Like I think that my authentic self in that sense has I'm not scared of it. The other side of the coin though is the side that no one is seeing, that comes in hand with being a first gen Latino. I think I'm still very uncomfortable. Even now I'm trying to think of the words. I'm still very uncomfortable like letting my coworkers know that, hey, sometimes I have to be off from this time to this time, not because I have kids, not because like I'm married, not because of this, but because my mom has 2 jobs. Like my mom buying a house was great and all, but now we have to pay a mortgage. And so she took on a second job so she can kind of fulfill all the bills and the mortgage and kind of like still have excess money to save and spend for life, because life is expensive. And so that means that I have to pick up my brother from his after school extracurriculars. That means I have to sometimes make dinner. That means that I have to help with homework, and I have to step in to where she can't. And I feel like that part is so uncomfortable because it's like, oh, you're such a good sibling. I'm like, yeah, but like I also can't live my life. Like a lot of the times I'm like, why haven't I moved far away from my family? Because like my family, like because they need me. Like I do things for them, like go home and like look through the mail, look through the bills, make sure everything's being paid. Like there are parts of me that corporate America still hasn't seen in my authentic. So again, there's two sides of the coin. There's the authentic side of who I am, and then there's the authentic side of like what the culture brings. So it's like understanding what a 401k is. I just kind of like, I'm getting the hang of it, but like, who told me about a retirement? Who told me about a 401? Like, I got told what a Roth IRA was when I was like 20, and I'm like, who's that? Who's Ira? Like, I saw it on a paper, and I was like, it's like, who's Ira? Is he nice? Like, like, is he a counselor? Is he gonna help me with money? And like, so just stuff like that. Like so like that's the part of corporate America that I haven't figured out how to be authentic with. Like, I still get nervous telling people like, oh, like I have something, like I have a family thing. Like I'll just put a block on my calendar and just be like reviewing scripts or like sending out emails. But like in reality, I'm like trying to like figure out like, okay, I have to go like help my mom out. I have to go pick her up, or like I have to do this. Like she has a doctor's appointment. So like that's the part that I haven't figured out yet. Like PTO, who is she? Don't know how to request her. Like I like don't know who she is. I worked a job for a year, not even knowing that I could I could ask for PTO, and like PTO was unlimited. But I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like I remember I slacked my manager, and I was like, can I like take 2 days off? Like I'm so sorry. Like I'll like have my laptop with me. So like, and she's like, no, that's the point of PTO, is like you like don't work. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good. Like 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 I same thing with like same thing with my first job ever. My first job out of college, I'm gonna be really candid here. I was offered $30,000 to live in LA, and I was like, I don't know if that's enough. Like that wasn't like the what went through my mind wasn't, that's nothing. That's in my mind I was like, I don't know if that's enough. Like is that good? Like if they're offering that to me, that probably means like you can do it. And like this is more money than my mom's ever made, or like probably like as much as she's ever made. So I guess like it works. And then then you show up and you're now working on like a team of like 12 white people, not understanding your situation at all. You're struggling with rent. You're sending money to your mom so that you can help pay for like your brother's phone bill, your brother's soccer shoes, like any other lingering money. And then the rest you're trying to pay your bills. Like, I don't know how that's supposed to work. I don't know how I'm supposed to have that conversation, who I'm supposed to have that conversation with, or if that's even a conversation to be had. So I think like that was my biggest struggle, and is still my biggest struggle. Like I left that job crying. I was distraught. I was like, I'm a failure. I couldn't make $30,000 work. And when I say that out loud now, I'm like, yes, you could not make $30,000 work, Hector. Like how did you think that was going to happen? Like I would ask the other like coordinators, like, oh, like under the table, I'd like super sneaky, like, oh, like how are you making this work? Like do you get paid the same as me? And most of them are A, living with their parents, B, getting support from their parents, or C, like are just rich and like got their trust fund early, I guess. And like that's when I realized, freak me, like I'm like, like I'm screwed. Like I can't have a job in advertising. Like clearly, because of like this lifestyle, I don't fit it. I don't fit this personality type. I can't work in advertising because I don't have money. And that was my innate like thought process. Then the pandemic hit, so I didn't have to worry about it because no one was hiring anyway. So I was jobless, living like at home, trying to find a job in something else. Like I was like, should I just change my career? Because I thought that I was like, okay, clearly like advertising is not for me. Like it's not for poor people. That was what I took away from that was. And at the end of the day, I was like criticized for it. I was criticized for leaving a job. Like so many people said bad things about me. Like, oh, I can't believe he was only there for like 3 months. Like that's nothing. Like blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, sorry that didn't make the cut for you, but like I was starving. Like I talked to one of my coworkers who was a person of color that I love her, and like I was able to like really form a relationship with her, and I told her my plan was, okay, if I like live in my car and like the storage unit is $35 a month, like I can just shower like I was crazy. I was a psycho. I was trying to make this work. And why? Because no one talked about that with me. Like my parents never were like, negotiate, Hector, like that's a thing. Like my parents weren't like $30,000, like, Hector, you're a college grad, like you should be making more money. So like that was a conversation I never had. Like investing, what is that? I don't know what that is either. So like that's the part of corporate America that I think I still am uncomfortable with. Like when people ask me, oh, what are your salary expectations? I'm like, well, how much you want to pay me? Like, like if it's more than 30,000, I will say yes, very much at this point. So like that's, like I said, like that's a part of corporate America that is still scary to me. Like the whole money situation, future of like investing and retirement. Like I don't get it, and I don't know if I ever will.
Nah, you definitely will, man. I mean, you're so early in your career, but I also think it's really interesting that you highlighted, and I love that you highlighted this, was, authenticity. When people think of the word, I feel like they often think about culture and they stop there, but it goes so much further than that, right? I mean, part of someone's authenticity may be, I'm an introvert. And you know what? It's really hard for me to do these like happy hours with my coworkers because I really just like to be at home, right? I don't know. Someone's part of their authenticity is that they're really curious, right? But they often don't feel comfortable like asking questions at work because they don't want to seem dumb, right? Quote unquote. There's so many things beyond just culture. And I feel like that's like a really just easy way for people to answer that. So I love the fact that you highlighted that it goes beyond that. I'm so curious for you too, though. I know that it's uncomfortable, some of these things. And first of all, you don't have to share any of this stuff, right? Like it's up to you, like what you do and don't want to share. Like, totally up to you. I'm curious, what does make you uncomfortable about it? I'm wondering if there was a certain experience that you were like, oh, well, I'm never going to do that again. Or, for me, at least, I remember like I didn't want to share certain things. For example, like this podcast, I remember people would be like, oh, what'd you do this weekend? And I never wanted to say the podcast because I was like ashamed of what it was at the moment. I was like, oh, I don't want them to say like, oh, his little fun Latino thing. You know what I mean? Or I just did. I almost compared my experience to other people's experience, and I put their experience on a pedestal and I put mine below. Whereas like in reality, that's just a story I made up in my head. Like, it's just our experience, right? But I know it's different for everyone, but I'm wondering for you in particular, like what do you think makes you uncomfortable in, opening up on certain areas?
I think what makes me the most uncomfortable is definitely my socioeconomic status. Like talking about what my parents do for work. Money. So like that's like the encompassing part of it is definitely socioeconomic. So in New York City, it's very interesting. Like, so
I'm born and raised in New York, by the way.
Okay. So like the high school system is very segregated. Like it's either you're smart and you get lucky, so you get into one of these specialized high schools, or you end up in your zoned high school, which could be trash. Like, or you maybe got lucky and your like zoned high school is like Forest Hills High School, so you're like, oh sweet, like this is a good school. So like, I think starting off there, that's where I begin. So I'm from Woodhaven. So my zoned high school was Franklin K. Lane. That was closed for incoming freshmen the year that I was gonna be a freshman, for the amount of like stabbings and knife like found in that year. And I was like, oh great, like guess I can't go to my zoned high school. And then my other option was Richmond Hill High School, which again, known for a lot of fights in the neighborhood, just like not a very good like environment. If like you kind of want to do something more, like leave like your neighborhood, maybe just leave. And so I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. And so I applied to specialized high schools, and I ended up going to Performing Arts High School in the city. And that was the first time where I was like, oh shoot, like there are like rich white people in this city. Like I totally forgot. Like that was like a mental block in my mind. Like this city, like going to Manhattan, that was like not a thing. Like I went for Christmas because my mom forced me, and she was like, let's go look at the lights, like las luces se ven tan bonitas. I'm like, yeah, like sure, but there's also like a ton of people, and like I don't want to deal with that. So that was probably the first time, was going to school, and I was like, oh snap, like there are like rich white people in the city, and like whose parents are like cardiologists, like their parents are like they were like, my mom's an art curator for like a museum. And I was like, what is that? What does that even mean? What is it? What is a curator? Like I had to Google that. Like I went home and I was like, curator. Like, I didn't know what that meant. So like, I never talked about my parents. Are you kidding me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that was a topic I never wanted to really touch. And
Yeah.
like, when people were to ask me like, oh, like, 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 what trains do you take? And I'm like, oh, frick, like, I have to tell them I take the J. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
when I was like, oh, I'm on the J line, and this is before gentrification. Let me like highlight that. Like, back in the day, for everyone listening, the J was not it. Like Brooklyn used to not like really be as white as it is now.
Yeah.
But so I was like, oh shoot, like I have to tell them I live on the J line. Like, I don't know how I don't know how that's gonna come off. So it was a topic I felt really uncomfortable with, always avoided it. Fast forward, I went to BYU. For
Yeah.
people who don't know, BYU, 60%, more than half, 60% of the university is in the top 20th percentile of income. And
Wow.
and then I think it's like 5% are in the 90% and like the lower half. So the larger part of the population of the country is now the lower part in this university, which is, i.e., me. So now I'm dealing with people who like are related to the Marriotts. Like I have people, I'm going to school with people who are like, oh yeah, like my dad like is like a marketing executive at Nike. And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, like you're coming from money. Like I used to think I knew money. This is like a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother level. Like I knew kids who were, let's go on my family's plane and go to San Diego for spring break at a beach house. And I'm like, you guys want to go to my house, my summer home in Mexico? Like it's my grandma's house, my little shack. And yeah, we could do that. And like, like it was just different. So,
Bro,
so
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So telling them my mom like now works as a housekeeper at a retirement home. Are you kidding me? To this day, and I hate myself for this because I shouldn't be like this anymore. But to this day, I still tell my mom, I still tell people, oh yeah, my mom works with old people. Like that's what I say. Leave it very vague. She could be a nurse. She could be a CNA. She could be a lot of things. But I don't tell them exactly what she does because it's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for me to think like I'm poor or like I come from this background, and it's just very uncomfortable. I definitely I was a scholarship student while I was at school, and I worked a job, so like it kind of felt like I had money because, oh, I have a scholarship that pays for like my rent, my tuition, my textbooks, and like the job that I'm working is for like my spending money. So it kind of feels like I have rich parents who are paying for everything. And so I kind of like wanted to, that's how I like could hang with like the rich kids. But I knew there were limitations. Like I remember the first time I got invited to go snowboarding, I was like, oh, like I can't drop like $120 right now on a ski lift and ticket and like rentals, like on something I've never done, and I'm gonna bust my ass. Like, no, like, and I had a friend's like, oh, I'll pay for it. Don't worry. Like, it's my Christmas present to you. And I'm like, thanks. I like didn't ask, but like, way to go, make me feel even more uncomfortable now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, like socioeconomic things I definitely tend to keep to myself, like what my mom does for work, where I grew up, and like stuff like that. I'm not really out telling people like, oh yeah, this is where I'm from. So
Yeah. No, I get that, man. That resonates with me so much, and it reminds me of my Instagram account. I would never post pictures from my mom's house. So my mom and my abuela, they still live in the same apartment in they live in Manhattan on the Upper West Side.
mhm,
And I used to never post pictures from there because I was ashamed of what it looked like.
mhm,
I mean, for context, like, they live in the projects, public housing, and I just never thought it was like Instagram worthy. And so before my job now, I was working at Facebook, and it was the first time, because it's a social network, everyone would add each other on Facebook and on Instagram. Like before that used to be my filter. Like no one would know about my life outside of work, right? But then now that we're adding each other, it's, they get to see the stories that I post. So I almost was like, oh, I'm never gonna post my grandma, right? Because I was ashamed for them to see like the different colors that didn't really match, the plastic covered sofas, you know what I
yeah,
mean? The plates and the decorations and just everything that was like so Dominican that didn't look like in like a Soho apartment, if you will. I was
yeah,
so ashamed, man. But eventually I got to the point where I would just like post my abuela. And what really happened was like, oh my God, that's so cute. Look at your abuela. She's so cute. And like the story in my head was like, they're going to look at everything besides my abuela, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, they didn't even look at the shit. They only looked at my abuela. So it was like this interesting situation where like some of it was like the story that I just made up in my head, and like it didn't really come true. But I still to this day I still feel a little bit insecure when I post a picture of that stuff, man. But I know we only have like 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to ask, this last question. You continue to grow and challenge yourself. What's one reason or one thing that motivates you to continue being your most authentic self?
Yeah, I think that it's my family. At the end of the day, I really do this for them. Despite like kind of all like the random stuff that I went through in college with just, oh, you're cute for a Latino boy, or you're like, oh, that's awesome that you've really come a long way. Like, I couldn't care less what any of those opinions have to say. I'm doing this for my family. Like, when I look back and when I get to go to Mexico and like go to my mom's hometown, like, I know that I'm doing this for her. And like for my brother, it's like, I want to be me. Like, I want to be like this Mexican American Latinx person that my mom has taught me to be. Like, my mom didn't teach me Spanish for me not to use it. She didn't teach me how to dance like cumbia, bachata, salsa, merengue for me not to dance it. Like, my mom didn't make these sacrifices for me not to take advantage of like the opportunities here. So I think at the end of the day, that's really my motivation. I tell my brother that all the time. Like, he definitely has gone through a slump right now being in high school of like caring. And I'm like, my guy, like, mom has done way too much for us to not care. Like, she's broken her back too many times for you to just like skip class or like miss an assignment or not study for a test. Like, that's stupid. Like, you don't do that. Like, if you need help, ask for it. Like, I'll tutor you, but like, don't just like, don't be a statistic. Like, don't let the world tell you like, this is who you are, this is what you're gonna be. Like, go out there and like grab it for yourself. Like, like, our parents came here for a reason, and like, that's what I'm doing this for. Like, that's where my motivation comes from, is if they came to like for a better life, I'm gonna make sure that I have it, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna be able to help them in return, and yeah, just give us all a better life, hopefully.
Mi gente, that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do us a favor, leave a rating and a review. This just helps us in the algorithm to ensure that these stories get heard by as many people as possible, and it'll ultimately help us reach our mission of redefining professionalism. Thank you, and see you next week.